Hello, welcome to Convergent Dialogues. This is Xavier Bonilla. On this episode, I'm talking to Charles Love. Charles is the Executive Director of Seeking Educational Excellence, a nonprofit organization which tries to empower disadvantaged students to reach their full potential. He's the host of The Charles Love Show on AM 560. He's also the co-host of Cut the Bull podcast. He's a scholar at 1776 Unites. He's written for City Journal. He's been in the New York Post. He's been on Fox News. He's been on many local TV shows, etc. And on this episode, we spend much of our time talking about education, I would say. That's really his area of expertise and where he kind of lands. And so we spend most of our time talking about some really interesting aspects of education. We start the conversation by talking about his background and his work in education and how he kind of landed there and why he's passionate about it. We talk about some of the current challenges with some of the CRT rhetoric dominating the conversation in education. We spend a good amount of time talking about what are some ways in which we can teach and learn about Black history in primary education. We talk about why people are very angry about CRT being taught in education at the moment. We also talk about learning all aspects of Black history, specifically that there are many things about Black history in the United States that are big key moments, but then also learning many positive elements as well, and having a more wide-ranging, robust example when we're teaching and when we're putting in our education programs, many aspects of Black history. He talks about the 1619 Project, some of its challenges in his new book that he has coming out. And then we end by talking about heterodox thinkers and politics of today. I'll just say that Charles is a really, really good guy. We've talked, I've been on his podcast, and, he is a conservative, right? And I am not. I talk to plenty of conservatives. I talk to plenty of liberals. But I have to say that he is genuinely a very good person. And he's got a big heart. His humanity really comes out, and he really cares. And so him and I, we don't agree on everything as it is with most people. No two people agree on everything. And so he's on the opposite end of things for me in many ways. But I consider him a friend. I think he's doing good work. And I really appreciate and value his kind of mission to create and to try to, find alternatives and not just kind of complain about things. And so he's doing really good work with his nonprofit organization. And so now I bring you Charles Love. I am here with Charles Love. Charles, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Of course. You were so kind as to invite me on one of your shows, Cut the Bull, with Shamika Michelle and the great Wilford Riley. And so that was a fun conversation. Episode 2, right?
Yeah, you got in right early. So you were one of the important elite. They were like, who's the first guy you want to have on your show? And you probably were first, but you weren't available. So we had to go to or something. I don't know what happened, but
you guys are too kind. That was a great conversation. Everybody should listen to and subscribe to Cut the Bull, and in particular, listen to episode 2. So
yes, if you don't listen to anything else,
just that one. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of fun things to talk about. And to just tell us brief snapshot of who you are and what you do, and all the particulars.
Okay. I am Charles Love again, the host of the Charles Love Show and co-host at Cut the Bull podcast, and the executive director of Seeking Educational Excellence. It's a nonprofit focused on advancing STEM and critical thinking as opposed to some other things, and a scholar at 1776 Unites. And, I do this primarily, I kind of came into it in a weird way. I'm not a PhD, and I wasn't like someone who said that I needed to write a position paper. I just saw the discourse, saw a void, and decided to fill it because nobody else was doing it.
Yeah.
At least not in the way that I do it.
Well, I think the really nice thing about you is that you're creating and you're producing stuff and you're trying to do some really good things. And, that's a lot better than just, people getting online or on Twitter all day and just, raging about how horrible everything is. You're trying to actually do some really good stuff, have really important conversations. And, so I think all of that is really respectable. And I love your perspective. And so that's, I can't wait to hear some of your ideas on some of the topics we have for today.
Well, I appreciate that. And one other thing I think, because there's so much noise and so much energy out there, I figured, why shouldn't I at least try to get people to take all that energy and harness it somehow?
Yeah.
Just yelling at each other. So go do something, that kind of deal.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I see it as well. So I think, I think that's great. I think that's the way we need more people like that. So, so let's start with talking about education. I know this is kind of your area. I know you love education, obviously. So maybe tell us about the, what is it, the foundation or what is the organization?
Seeking Educational Excellence.
Yeah, maybe we could just jump off of that. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we can jump off into some of the other topics.
Right. So I came along because kind of having a crisis of what's going on and saying, what's the best way, like I said earlier, to get in the fray and kind of fill a void and look at what's missing. And so the organization was started about 3 years ago by Kevin Jackson. He's a former Fox News analyst. And he was just like, hey, let's focus on STEM. Let's teach them in the inner city and teach Black kids and other poor minorities, poor whites, just anybody who's struggling, STEM. And that was, a great idea, seems solution-based, and that's the way I tend to point my focus. But then, the last 18 months happened, and I look at it like we're now fighting back from a hole. So before we can focus on STEM, we need to get people to stop, reverting back to all these other things, which we'll get to, all the stuff that you and I are both so tired of talking about that, keep coming up. And, we get this loud rage and this fight about, what history should be taught or how it should be taught and all that kind of stuff. And there's some parts of it that's important and some part that's, just people venting their frustration. But we got to look at it like, okay, now what? Like one of the things I often say to people, when I get in these debates about what the solution is to some of the problems, I say, think of all the Black people and think about all the ones that that have letters behind their names, a PhD or PE, they're accountants, they're doctors, and how many of them are unemployed? Most people tell me none. So I say, I can't solve all the problems that way, but maybe if we steered more people in that direction, the more people who successfully come out the other end will be doing better in society in spite of all the other things you're yelling at. So we kind of take that approach. It's like, critical thinking skills, how to decipher what you're hearing in the media or what someone tells you, or even your teacher, how to take it, not get frustrated about it, agree with it or don't agree with it. And if you don't agree with it, even if you agree with it, ask probing questions and think about things differently. So that's what we want people to do. And that's what we were trying to direct people at. We're working on a civics thing that we're doing to try to get more people involved in that, because we think that's lacking. So basically it's just trying to get people educationally to focus on the hard, tangible things that they can change.
That's all really wonderful. And I'm wondering, why I have two questions, but is the emphasis on STEM, or that just happens to be one of the pieces that you guys promote, or why that focus?
Well, initially it was primarily on STEM, not only on STEM, but it was a primary. But you have to evolve with what's going on, and but in general, it's just how do we get more people? So even if introducing STEM is important, for instance, but also if you look at certain areas, it depends on where the child is going to school and what, obviously we're primarily talking about public schools. If you're in a city where the dropout rate is high, then maybe instead of STEM, it's just like, how do we stem the tide of the number of students that are dropping out, improve the graduation rates, or, looking at a city that a high dropout rate, but of the kids who are graduating, we find that too many of them have been passed through, and they aren't really proficient at, grade level. I remember an article in Chicago, I want to say it was 1987, but it's decades ago. So it's not a new problem. Like, that's the other thing. People approach all these problems, including race, like it's new, right?
Yeah.
And the article said it's something like it's graduation season and millions of teens are walking across the stage to start the next phase of their life. Unfortunately, here in Chicago, a large percentage of them can't read the words on the diploma they're being handed.
Yeah.
And it sits with me because it's so bothersome that we get caught up in all this noise. And the key is that before you get to anything else, why do we have, let's say, 28% of the students dropping out when it's so much lower everywhere else? And of the, 70 plus or minus percent that are graduating, you have a large percentage of them, maybe not a plurality, but not a majority, but you may have more than 15% of them who really can't read or do math at 12th grade or maybe even 10th grade level. So that's the problem. So whether it's STEM or not, that still should be a focus. So we just say focus on, the things that you can control and the things that will make a better student and prepare them better, as opposed to all the other things that they tend to be focused on.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I guess, well, the other question I had was about, you were saying that you guys started doing this a couple of years ago, and then over the past, probably 12 to 18 months, you had to kind of readjust based on what's going on now. Do you see that as important to address the things that are going on in education at the moment, or do you feel like a little bit of that, but you're still gonna keep marching along on the kind of mission statement or whatever that you guys have, and still keep doing that stuff? Or how do you kind of see, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there's going to be another, issues or current day issues in education. And so how much do you want to engage with whatever's going on in education at the moment, or still just kind of do your thing and maybe touch it a little bit? Or where do you kind of see that balance, I guess?
My God, you scared me when you said 5 or 10 years. Man, because I think it's doing our work a disservice. It's unfortunate that we have to talk about it. I think we'd be naive not to, though. But I don't want to. I think it hurts. I mean, but let's be honest. I told you what the plan was. You said it's not partisan, whatever. It makes sense. It's good. Do you think I can take that plan to many people today in the fire and the fight that we have right now, and somebody would pay attention to it?
Unlikely.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't have a choice. Right. So we do address it, but I don't think it helps for us to add it. We do, but I don't think it helps. I just think it's necessary because if I showed up to the party now and said, hey, regardless of, who the audience is, and said, hey, STEM, or hey, let's get those graduation rates up. Shut up, CRT is what they'll tell me. Whether it's shut up, I must stop CRT, or shut up, CRT is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Either way, they're going to tell me that my response to what I'm going to get is shut up, right? So I have to find a way to craft it to whoever it is, like, hey, you like CRT? How about this? As crazy as it is, but I don't think it's beneficial to be in this to spend the amount of time. I'm not saying the fight's not worthy. The way they're fighting is bad, and I don't think the amount of time being spent. Like, I was talking to a teacher, a retired teacher the other day, and they're going back and forth about other stuff. So you don't think it should be taught? Da, da, da. And I just had to say, excuse me, how many hours of the day is history? They're like, what do you mean? It's like a class. I said, because everybody's taking all the air out of the room for one class of the day.
Yeah.
When was the last time in education you've heard somebody talk about math?
I mean, not recently. I don't
Right.
hear
So I
about.
can't talk about STEM because nobody cares about it right now.
Right, right. Well, I guess not. Well, I'll say this. I think that they care about it through that lens, and that's the problem. I think is that we're putting a lens on something that was not at least originally designed to be that way. Right. My understanding is, critical race theory is out of legal academia. And it's, that doesn't mean that, it can't evolve or you can't, do it in other
Or they
areas
can't
necessarily.
adapt it, or somebody else can say, hey, I
Yeah.
like this. Then they take it and add some pieces on. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I mean, you could, I guess in theory do that, but in principle, it wasn't that way. And so it's just like, I don't need to know, Euclid's geometry or Pythagoras through critical race theory lens. I just don't think I really need that. I don't think students really need that. And, we can get into it a little bit later, but I also have questions, serious questions about, do we need to be teaching this in second grade? Right? Like if you want to maybe sort of kind of, 11th, 12th grade, I could maybe see that a little bit, but, and, at the collegial level, fine. But, elementary school, probably not. I mean, and so there's a balance to that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. At the moment, it's the thing that's taking up all the oxygen in the room, and so then people don't really want to hear just about STEM or many other topics, unless it's somewhere either opposed or for that, and so it just becomes really difficult. So
should we spend like 4 or 5 minutes on this and just get it out of the way and never say it again? Well, you're running the show. We can move on. We can spend an hour on CRT or no more time.
We can come back to it. We can come back to it. I do want to. Okay. I want to set it up a little bit before we get to it. I think it's important to talk about, right? But I think I want to know just a little bit of how you kind of got involved in education. How did you become involved in it? How do you have some really good kind of advocacy kind of stuff for it? And so how was your intro into doing this? Did you just say, hey, I'm just going to, start this, foundation and that's it? Or how long have you been doing, kind of education stuff and having a passion for that?
Well, what kind of triggered me beyond what I mentioned before was my upbringing and my education. So I think age had a lot to do with it, and luck, and, who you draw as a teacher and that kind of thing. But I had a kind of weird mix of my, education as a child. So, because on the one hand, I grew up in virtually an all Black town. We had this conversation on the podcast once, and Shamika and I had a battle on who had the fewer white kids. I won by leaps and bounds by about like 50%. I went through K through 12, and I went to school in my grade. Now there were a couple in the class, but I think maybe 3, the whole K through 12, and only later. So I never went to school with a white kid.
This was in remind me, it's just in
Gary, Indiana.
Gary, yeah, that's right. Gary, Indiana. That's right. Yeah.
And to be honest, everybody looks at the race thing as just black and white, but I can go further. I remember one of my friends being shocked by this, one of my Jewish friends, when I said there were Jews in my neighborhood, because it was a largely Jewish neighborhood, years before blacks moved in, but they were all the older people who never went away, but their kids had already graduated. So I also went to school with no Jews, very, very few Muslims. And if they were, a Nation of Islam, not the Middle Eastern. No Asian students, and very few Mexicans. We would always talk about Mexicans, but they were really Puerto Rican. So it was pretty much 96% Black. Right? Gary, Indiana, mostly poor or working class.
Sure.
Right? And most of the teachers were Black, except for the white teachers who didn't follow the white flight and run away. So I say that to say, so Charles had a typical urban Black upbringing in education in his neighborhood, which is true. Yet, my teachers, and I wrote about this in my essay for 1776 Unites, were the first, frontline soldiers from the civil rights movement, right? So they were the people who were college age at that time, right? Seeing it for the first time, going to college with that new energy. So they came in and they taught us this Black history that people are talking about now, that everybody you see on Twitter is like, well, I went to this school as a white kid and I never heard of Harriet Tubman. Sad for you. Or Black kids that say, well, I grew up in the South and I heard a little bit, but I didn't hear about this. But I'm like, dude, we had flashcards. We knew everyone, like people bring up people now. You ever heard about that? Yeah, we heard about that. So same time, let me bring it home. They didn't harp on it. They were like, we need you to know that there's Black excellence. We're going to teach you the negativity. We're going to make sure you know Black excellence. We're going to make sure you know that America's a place you can do some things you can't do anywhere else, right? So there were positives. One, they showed the Black excellence. Two, and in the math class, crazy concept, they taught us math. Right? Sometimes you have to say, regardless of the intent, what are the effects? So I'm not even saying their intentions are bad. I'm assuming that they got positive intentions, but I do know my common sense says that if 15% are dropping out, is straight just out of school, not at all, and 15% of people who graduate can't read, at beyond a ninth grade level, a heavy focus on what they missed from a history class or teaching them that white people are out to get them can do nothing but negative.
Yeah.
So I was just like, somebody has to say something and bring it. So last piece is I'm listening and watching the other people who I kind of agree with saying that this is a problem. I'm like, okay, I agree with you. Go ahead, Johnny. Go ahead, Ted Cruz. Go ahead, Tom Cotton. Tell them why it's a problem. Then I'm like, I don't really like the way you say it's a problem. And you may not even be wrong. Let's be fair. I'm not just going to attack them and say they're wrong. But I was like, nobody's going to listen to you the way you're saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So somebody needs to explain this in a way that gets them to understand that, all right, I hear you, brother. You think it's unfair and people need to know, and the current curriculum is not giving them enough. Maybe they need to know that. You might be right. But do you think it's going to help the kids who are already struggling in the coursework they already have to give them more coursework?
Yeah.
And I'll talk about one thing I think that we should do that's out of the box, but I'll let you get in here because this is a conversation. This is not just me rambling on.
No. It's good. It's good. Well, I'll say that's, you have an interesting perspective or background, right? Because I think for a lot of people, there is a void of learning about different aspects or different figures in American history. I mean, that's just true. I mean, there's a certain element where, at the federal level, everyone is learning and, primary education, they're learning all of these kind of basic things to go out in the world and be a functional adult. But, you're going to have differences by state, by different jurisdictions, and, certain different curriculums are used in different places. And so, people at different, generations and in different parts of the country, they're going to emphasize one thing over something else. And so there will be some gaps and a void of what is, what someone's exposed to and what someone isn't exposed to. And I think that's, in a sense, problematic, but I think you can have some difference, right? I don't think it needs to be completely uniform. And there's different ways of educating at the first 12 years of education, but there should be enough exposure, right? Where people, outside of, Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King Jr., like they should know a lot more than just those two guys, or just know about the, awful elements of slavery. Like those are all important things, obviously, to learn. It's part of our history, but there's many other aspects of, you're talking about Black history that is, should be celebrated, and not just, for 28 days every year, right? There should be things that we should learn in our curriculums and stuff. But I think that I bring that up because there's a void, or because things are outdated, or because people don't discuss it in a kind of holistic or balanced way. Now you have some of the ideology. Now you have some of the movements that are going on where it's like, well, not only are we going to teach critical race theory in colleges and universities, and we're going to have these mandated trainings for people in businesses, and we're going to, do all this stuff. Well, let's just go one step further for the next generation, maybe with the best intentions. And we're going to, there's a void here, and a lot of people don't get this, stuff about all these other aspects of Black history or various histories. And so we're going to teach this. And, and here's the ideology. And I think that's what the problem with that becomes. That's a lot harder to do, I think, if there isn't a void, right? And I think that's part of the problem is that we don't have, we haven't done a good job in the education system of having a pretty well-rounded, balanced approach of teaching all parts of our history in the United States. And so now, there's a void. Now you have, an ideology that's trying to fill it, and, it's becoming more and more and more contentious. So I guess the question I have for you on this piece is, why at this level, right, of critical race theory, why is everybody animated about this, right? Why are they so animated about what we teach kids in school? So this is obviously at public school level, federally and or statewide. Why is everybody so angry about it, right? I guess that's my biggest question I have. I have reasons why, I kind of, get irritated at it, but I'm not, going to devote all of my life and, go to every school board meeting and yell about it. Like, why are folks so angry about this?
Things. I think it's a proxy.
Okay.
I would agree with those who are pushing it, that for some that they're saying, well, they don't even know what's going on in school, right? Because many didn't before, COVID and remote learning. But neither do they, right? A lot of the people who are academic level, the kindies and all those people, right? They can have their theory, they can do whatever. But it's not like they're in the public school and attention would know better what their kid is being taught than the people who are saying this isn't CRT. If they're not teaching racial essentialism and that kind of stuff, well, how do you know? You can't be in every school district in every place, and unless somebody's secretly recording their teacher, you don't know. Yeah. So what happens is you could be angry based on something you think is happening and be mad about it and not know, but technically still be right. Right. You think if this is going on and you're mad, but you have no proof that it's going on, and you just, dumb luck. You're right. It's going on. So, but that still doesn't change the fact that the loudest voices aren't close enough to it to know what's happening. So I just think it's a proxy from a political thing, which is why you hear me always say that this argument, like many of the arguments, criminal justice, healthcare, all this stuff, is a cultural problem that we're trying to fix legislatively. And it's not that I'm saying that you won't need legislation at some point to fix it. It's the governmental thing that's going to happen. What I'm saying is we need to collectively decide what the problem is and what the root of the problem is, and then go to our legislators and say, fix it. But that's not what we do, right? Yeah. We get upset about something, we scream. The politicians are politicians. They gonna politic. I can't even get mad at them. So they hear us yelling. So they say, let's jump on that because the people who are most likely to vote for me are thinking this. So I'm just gonna go out and say it. Or the people who are most likely to vote for me are thinking this. So I'm just gonna say it. I don't even have to really mean it. I'm saying it because then those people who are animated will be more animated, but they'll be happy with me. And then it goes down this crazy cycle that mirrors back to them. So now they're more angry because look, that politician told me that this, and they should know because they're politicians. No, they heard it from you. Right. And it goes all. So I just try to ignore the noise and look at what is actually happening. Is it good or bad? So I tend to lean on the side of one because I can see that it's bad and you're not pushing it. Now I may disagree with them and the way they do it. So it says their name or their party on it. Right. But at the same time, I'll say, but, if my choice is the one who's fighting against it poorly or the one who's pushing kind of thing. So I usually just stay out of the fray at all and focus on what's one of the things you said that's interesting is you talked about there being a void, and you mentioned something from of a federal level, and that came that they need to be standard, but everybody's not going to be the same, and that's really interesting from which I think, you might think differently, and other people may not, may disagree with me, but I just like the fact that I think a little bit differently, and I think about that, and most people don't even think about it from a standpoint of an example of why I think I'm right, that thinking that politics and politicians are going to be the solution to any of these problems is a fool's errand. And so you talk about that. So to be fair, right, we could say good and bad of either one of them, but both the left, but now we're going to get political just for a second, because I don't like to specifically, but Democrats and Republicans each tried from a macro level federally to fix the problem. We're going to step in as big brother and we're going to fix education, right? Technically they did, right? The right called it no child left behind, and the left called it Common Core, right? Right. They came from different places. Neither one of them fixed it. Localities in the states still run education, which they knew that. Push you in a certain direction, dangle federal dollars in your way, and hope you do it. But they knew they didn't have the teeth to actually do it, because people don't understand that's what the Department of Education doesn't run schools. They don't open schools. They don't go down to the curriculum level and decide. So they're supposed to be like collecting data and seeing what they're actually doing. And, they're persuading at this point. So that's why neither one of them worked, right? So Common Core, they were like, well, they're just creating new math, and they're telling you have to do it this way, and I don't even understand how to do this. And, but still be credit because you could look at the way they did it. No Child Left Behind, people are like, yeah, good. We're going to give them some standards. But now you're forcing them to reach this certain level all the same across the country, regardless of where the students are, and don't, which ended up making the teachers teach to the test. But nothing in the policy actually said you had to teach to the test, but it doesn't matter because it happened. That's why people went to jail in Atlanta, and you got the same problem. Now, we are, 21 years removed from No Child Left Behind, Common Core, I don't know, 10. Have the schools and the curriculums really changed?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I don't think it's drastically changed.
Right. I mean, they changed some things, and they but did they move the needle the way either one of them intended to do?
Yeah,
because the federal system wasn't built to do so.
Yeah. Well,
it's still the states and the localities.
Right. Well, there's always this like kind of, again, this push-pull kind of thing of, I hear the loudest people in the room talking about, you hear us on both sides of what is, if I go to a public school, or excuse me, if my parents go to, I send my kids to a public school as a parent, what are they teaching my kids? Right. And that's fair. That's totally fair. I think that's totally fair to be involved and concerned and, all of those things. But, it just, in some ways, critical race theory is our current version of all the people that got upset about No Child Left Behind or Common Core or whatever. People got real animated about that 20 years ago. I remember people getting animated about that. People animated about, the whole Common Core piece. I think that obviously they're different. I'm not comparing. One's a piece of legislation, one's ideology, and people are going to get all upset because I said that. I'm not comparing them. I'm not necessarily putting them in the same bucket, but I'm just saying that there are important differences, and I think it's fair to critique it and challenge it. But, it's just another thing about education that people get upset about or potentially upset about. And I understand that, like, I get it. I guess the thing that, for me is, yeah, there's what you learn in school. And I'm not saying that necessarily, we should, allow for it to happen necessarily, or, kind of, we were talking earlier, maybe, only in history or maybe at certain grade levels, et cetera. But I mean, there's plenty of things that you'll learn in school kind of as like electives or whatever that, isn't necessarily going to stick with you. Right. I mean, I can't tell you what I learned in third grade. I mean, aside from the fundamentals, like I'm not, but I think it is one of those things though, that it can become dangerous if it's every year you're just getting this iteration of it, right? You learn in third grade and you get in fourth grade, you get in eighth grade, you get in 10th grade. And it's just like, okay. And I guess my whole thing about it is, it's the same thing we said in the beginning. I don't need to know that many of the tenets of critical race theory, should be taught in biology or chemistry or, geometry or, and that's where I think my biggest, kind of criticism comes is like, okay, if you want to teach that, that's fine. You should maybe at a certain level teach it as a roundabout way. So, but I guess all that to say, isn't just the kind of uproar and animus, kind of how people said about, No Child Left Behind, and, there's too much pressure on tests and all these things, or Common Core, they're changing the way we learn math. Like, isn't just another kind of sort of panic that people have about another idea or legislation or some, some other way of teaching things in school, public schools at the, kind of federal level, or you think it's a little bit more than that?
No, I agree. I mean, the only difference is this is a little more, a little more, how would you put it? I guess it's different in the sense that when they do it at an extreme, it is kind of, pitting people against each other. A bit in a way, or depending on how far they go. That's the thing. Everybody's not doing the same. Some of them truly are just saying, let's teach Black history, right? Some of them are saying, America is inherently racist to the core. It's in the DNA, which I have a problem with. Right. Some of them are saying white people, right? So it's like degrees, right? So it starts off like, then it goes to, whoa. Then it goes to, hey. Yeah, right. So that's the problem. But I like to throw out a potential solution, since I'm all about solutions, really quick, and see what you think.
Yeah.
Twofold. You talked about the void, and then I have another thing. Now, one of them is, I get the credit for it because I haven't heard anybody else said it, but it wasn't my original idea. It's going, you having a podcast and interviewing people, and it's so funny the way it came up. They were just throwing it off as one-offs. And then when I was little, such and such. And then that's what made me think of that. So first, as far as a teaching of history, I don't want a Black history. Mm-hmm. I want you to incorporate everybody's history and just teach it like you teach American history, you can teach ancient history, and you can teach, world history. Yeah. And get as much in as you can, but make sure you touch on everybody. Because as a Black guy, I even remember, I don't know why, maybe I'm wired differently, but I remember when I was, maybe in my teens, early 20s, and they were talking about this race thing. It was, because it's always been a race thing, it just evolves. But it's like, I think at the time it was TV, and it's when Jesse Jackson was boycotting the Academy Awards, and we need more Black people in the movies, we need more Black people on TV. And even as a Black guy, I didn't disagree with it. I was like, I wanted to see more representation. But at the same time, just my logic wouldn't stay suppressed. And I said, but if we really want everybody treated fairly, why are we only saying Black and white? So we just don't really care about Hispanics having TV shows. We just cool with that. No Chinese. We just cool. Just as long as Black and white people got TV shows, everybody's okay.
Right.
So it's the same thing. If they teach history, so I don't want you just teach. If you only teach slavery, Jim Crow, bad. Thomas Jefferson, slave. But or a great one when they were doing the anniversary of the Tulsa massacres. See, all these people, that's one of the things all the white people were on Twitter saying, I didn't even know about that, which is a shame. But they were like, this massacre. And they just burned down all these Black banks and all that stuff and stole their wealth. And I'm like, I'm just saying, I want people to learn that. True enough. But my problem is context. So we learn that they burn all this stuff down that Black people own. But we ignore the fact that there had to be a situation for them to own it in the first place. But ever Black business owners. So there were no Black bankers, no Black business owners, no Black retailers, none of that stuff. There were just slaves, and then white people burn down all their banks and then say, we're teaching, pre-founding to, the founding. We're teaching 1776 to the Civil War, we're teaching whatever, and put it all in. That's one. The second thing I think you're going to find interesting is I'm interviewing these people. Let me see. So I interviewed Amity Shlain, and we're talking about Coolidge, just random. And then she said, you know what, like, for instance, my son was going to X, and one of her kids, and she's like, I'm not overly religious, but I sent him to a Jewish day school. right? And then I'm talking to Sylvia Foti. She wrote a book about finding out her grandfather was a Nazi. He was some war hero, but they had suppressed the truth. And she's Lithuanian. She grew up in Chicago. She's probably in her 60s. She's like, yeah, when I was growing up, every Lithuanian knew about my grandfather. Saturday we were going to Lithuanian school. Then I talked to my Chinese friend and I said, why don't we incorporate some of the Black history there? But for the Black people who want to know more about that history, why don't we go to school on Saturday like every other ethnic group does and learn our Black history there?
Well, I think here, this is what's interesting about this, right? I think that in this regard, I totally agree with you. And I hear other people say this as well. And I agree with it. And I feel, so to your very first point earlier on, we have to have now, if you're talking about how do we create something, right? How do we present an alternative? How do we present something else? And my view is, look, we understand slavery. We understand that it was for many years and it was a grotesque part of our history. Absolutely. And we understand the ripple effects that continue to this day. We understand that. I don't think many people dispute that. I think what we also have to understand is that, just like you're saying, well, first, for Black folk in this country, this is their home. Like, this is all they know, right? For hundreds of years. Now, that was for many of those years, not on their own accord. They're obviously enslaved. I mean, that was, a horrendous piece, but this is the only place they know. All their generations, this is all they know. And so to try and say, like what you're saying, well, let's teach, Black history, or we teach, maybe Mexican American history, or we teach, whatever, Chinese American history. I think we have to have a history that teaches American history, which is going to incorporate many of those stories concurrently with, if you will, I guess, the central story, if you want. Like, I know what he's saying, that you have to, take out the founding fathers, or, we don't learn about the Civil War, obviously there's like the basics of, the events that happen, and you can't obviously get at every single event that ever happened. I mean, no history class does that, but I think it's important to say, well, what about, how do we understand, freed Black slaves that fought for the Union side in the Civil War, and many of those stories and accounts we don't hear about, or we don't know about. How many Black soldiers fought in World War I and World War II, or how, what are those stories like? I think you made up a good point about the massacre, where it's like, yes, but these people were business owners, and what did they go through, and what was that like, and how that was difficult. And obviously this was a horrible event, but you can't just only tell the story of one group of people in the United States through a series of horrible event after horrible event after horrible event. I mean, we should learn those things, of course, but it's, what about all of the other aspects of one group or one population in the country that have also had some really bright moments, and some moments where, they've really flourished, and so I think there should be a balance, this, holistic kind of way of doing it. And you could do this with other groups as well, obviously. So I think, you and I are probably saying the same thing, is, to me, the alternative that you get is something like that. I mean, right. That's what you have to do. I think you have to do something like that. It can't be this strange segregation of, well, that's Black history, that's Latin history, that's white history. Yeah. I don't think that's, I think it's fine if you want to, for some groups, if they want to have, their kind of their own thing, and they want to have some, cultural pride. And like, I'm not saying we should take.
Oh, no, that's fine, but you can't expect the public school to add that to the curriculum and everything, and teach you to read, write, and arithmetic. Yes. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm saying the same thing. So I want to, because I know you're part of 76 Unites. maybe just tell us where you're at now. I don't hear it talked about too much anymore, somewhat, but I know it's still out there. But what are your kind of thoughts on this? 1776 and 1619 and all of that. Where are your current thoughts? I guess if people have talked about it a little bit, but what are your current thoughts on it at the moment?
Well, hopefully they start talking about it again. My thoughts haven't changed. I say that because jokingly, but because I have a book coming out this fall, and it is called Race Crazy, BLM 1619 and the Progressive Racism Movement. I can probably just stop there. I think you know what my thoughts are.
That's a strong title.
Well, you got to get people to read it. No, but I think that 1619 is really bad, but not completely for the reasons that everyone does, but kind of. But I look at things in a holistic way, fair way, or give them their argument way. So what were they thinking, kind of deal. So my biggest problem with that is the biggest problem is the very fact that much of it is true.
So real quick, yeah, sorry. Real quick, just for listeners, I mean, some people may have kind of heard of it or whatever. Just kind of give us the 90-second view of what 1619 is, how it came about, and what its main tenets are.
Okay, the 1619 Project is a project series of essays and some other works started by Nicole Hannah-Jones, but spearheaded by the New York Times Magazine. It became a series. It won a Pulitzer Prize, which should be taken back, but hasn't yet. And was immediate. I think it was the end of 19. So a lot of people are tying a lot of this race-focused education to George Floyd and all that stuff, but obviously things accelerated there. But this was before that. I think it came out August of 19, and by beginning of the school year, they were already in 4,000 schools. So nobody even looked at it or read it. They just, boom, pushed it out because they liked the narrative. And even some historians pushed back, but I don't think they did it enough. So the point is, it was initially when it came out, it was a framework of the country to say the reason why it's a date is to say, and why we have alternately the 1776 unites, is that it's saying that 1619 was the true year of the country's founding, not 1776. And that's why they call this project. And it's because it was the first year that African slaves were brought onto the land. Right. And so they frame up as like, what if we gave a different narrative and told you that this is when the country's true founding was, and it started there. A premise. And then there's about 14 essays, and the essays are on different areas of political, socio and political topics under that same framework, pointing out how Blacks struggle in these areas, and it's primarily because of the country's founding and due to slavery, not just racism, but slavery is endemic to the country, and the country was founded on slavery, as if to say, but for slavery, there would be no country.
Right, and so the fact that there is this pretty serious reimagining of our country's founding is, I think, why many people become kind of up in arms, and also that it's all centered around slavery. And so you're basically saying like, yeah, 1776 was, I don't think 1619 says that it's not important, that it's not, a type of founding for certain aspects, but that the true founding was when slaves came here, 1619, came off the boats and the whole thing.
Yeah, but it also says that it doesn't say it's not the true founding, but it says to 1776. It basically says the ideals of the Declaration of the Independence. Declaration of Independence was a lie. So not that the guy who said it didn't mean it because he didn't live up to it, because a lot of people say things that they truly believe and don't live up to. It said the ideals that we were founded as stated in the Declaration of Independence was a lie.
Yeah, and that does remind me of out of the stuff that Delgado wrote in Critical Race Theory, which is they don't push for Enlightenment values, and they don't like some of the aspects of objectivity and rationality and things like that, is my understanding. So Yeah. So there's some very harsh criticisms. Okay. So back to what your criticism was of
Right.
one of your main criticisms of 1619.
Right. Well, I was saying that it's partially true. Because, I mean, when they talk about slavery was bad, what am I going to say? No, it was great, or it didn't last this long, or wasn't this thin, or it didn't have lasting effects. I mean, come on. I think very few people are saying that. I can't say none, but if they are, they're wrong.
Right. Right.
But that's not the problem. You see, she's taking, and many of the other essayists are taking their opinions. So that's what's so dangerous about it. You take truth. So in some cases they're just wrong. So some historians kind of took them to task for a couple of things that were wrong, but they left out a bunch of stuff. I mean, as it would come up, you might be the first interview I do that I actually start to leak some of the stuff in the book because I wanted to get it out there first. We're getting close to release time.
Okay, good.
So it's stuff like, so the historians, you can find articles that say that one of the things they said that they had a problem with was that in Nicole Hannah-Jones, the founder, so she has an essay of her own. It's the first one. Mm-hmm. It's the longest one. It's the most in-depth one, and probably the most, problematic one. Mm-hmm. But she says that America fought the Revolutionary War because they didn't want to own slaves, and the British were going to stop them from owning slaves. Mm-hmm. So historians took them to task. I laughed at it because I'm like, but anybody who's not even a historian could just say, okay, what year was the Revolutionary War and what year did the British end slavery?
Right.
Oh, 60 years later. Okay, and then move on. That would be easy, but that's what they took them to task, took her to task on. But one of the things I say in the book, I give you one piece of my book. I said, giving them their argument. So these white Europeans, because they tend to paint white Europeans the same way, right? Those, the people who are against this, Enlightenment stuff, right?
Right.
The Delgados, the Bells, and all that kind of thing. So they'll say, white Europeans. So in this case, okay, they're both white Europeans. So my question was, let's give them their argument and assume that they're trying to do the right thing, but let's use some logic. They're saying the true founding is 1619. Let's throw 1776 out the window. The true founding is 1619 because that's when the first slaves were brought. But as children, we all watched the Schoolhouse Rocks, right? And there was a Schoolhouse Rock on Plymouth Rock. Well, Plymouth Rock was also white European, and it was 1620, right? So the question I asked in the books is like, let's be fair. Let's throw out George Washington and all those so-called quote unquote white founders. If white Europeans are all the same, and in 1619, the group came the following year, why is 1 year such a big deal? Uh-huh. Why aren't they trying to say it founded in 1620? It's because the 1620 Plymouth Rock Europeans, which are the ones that had the foundation for what became our country, private property, freedom of religion and things of those natures, were not the people from 1619, right? Religious persecution, they were different. So we can't. So my question to those people would make people, because I've never heard this argument before, it's like, okay, forget about 1776. Somebody asked them why not 1620. I would love to hear what they've said. It's never been asked, but I ask it in my book. So there's that point. And then it goes on to other things. Nicole Hannah-Jones also says, she paints this wonderful picture about the good part of Reconstruction before it went off the rails, which is all true. Right. But she makes a slip up, and I'm surprised no historians take it because this is a biggie for me. She says that blacks got the right to vote. It's 1868, and they're voting or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this newfound equality, which was pushed by these free blacks who fought over all these hurdles to go and vote, ushered in these black elected officials, and they're the reason we got our first black senator. So someone needed to give her a history lesson because, until the early 1900s, the senators were elected by state legislatures. Mm-hmm. The people in the state legislatures were already sitting, and they were elected by all white people because black people didn't get to vote until the month before he was elected. So the state legislators who got together and elected rebels were the white state elected officials who had been elected before they got the right to vote. So to say that blacks rose up and voted these people in is just factually inaccurate, and nobody pointed it out.
Yeah, and I think some of the things I've heard from the counters is, Well, when people say it's historically inaccurate what their claims are, they're saying that because of how white historians have decided to tell the story, leaving out other aspects of other groups. And so it becomes this kind of, everything is just pushed back on this revisionist history where it's like, well, if we have a very black centric kind of way of looking at this, well, then the story is different or the history is somehow different or something like that. I think that's usually the kind of retort that people come back with on that. I don't know if you.
Well, I agree with that, except that how many people, just like we talked about the debates on education and everything else, because it's a natural instinct, it's not enough. But how many people you think read all of the essays? What percentage of the people talk about it you think read them all?
I'm
pretty low, wouldn't you say?
I would guess it's pretty low, but
I read them all at least 4 times.
Well, that's not surprising to me.
In
that's
the
not
book, there's a
me.
chapter on every essay. I pick apart. So while some of that is true, it's true because you talk, but that's not fair. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It means that that person who is making that attack only read an article about your stuff, so they're guessing something, and they may be partially right. But I'm saying it's more than that, and I know because I go through what they say specifically. So, like, there's an article, an essay, I'm sorry, where they talk about the during slavery, of course, talk about how bad, America was in the South and cotton. They were trying to, it's on capitalism, and they're basically trying to spin, again, starting with true premises, on how the South and many people got wealthy off the back of slaves. They made all this money, all this stuff happened, and slavery was bad and this, that, the other. Mm-hmm. But then they tried to tweak it and make it sound like the South was the economic engine of the country, which factually is not true.
Yeah.
Right. So the banks and the financial industries and all that kind of stuff, shipping and all that stuff wasn't them. Right. But we're just going to act like that. And then after Reconstruction, they're just going to act as if, when the Union, when Sherman burned his way to the coast, that a lot of these people weren't left destitute.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and here's one that really bothered me. Here's another one, back to Nicole Hannah-Jones, because, it's her baby.
Yeah.
She mentions a Reconstruction a little bit, a decent amount of Reconstruction. And I'm amazed that this whole piece is about slavery and what happened after, and connecting it to Jim Crow and on. And the time they spent on Reconstruction, right? They never mentioned Grant, the 2-term president who decimated the Klan.
Yeah.
It's all Rutherford B. Hayes.
Yeah. I mean, Grant was, again, the first, obviously since Lincoln, right there, but he was, aside from Lincoln, the first president reelected and served all terms, I think, since, I'm going to get this wrong, one of the early presidents. I don't remember which one, maybe Jackson. Maybe, I think Jackson sounds right. And he was extremely hard. I mean, so much as going into like homes and taking Klansmen out and, prosecuting them. I mean, he was hard on the Klan. I mean, he was not,
people don't understand. Let's be real. The Klan that we know, that we saw in the movies, the Woodrow Wilson Birth of a Nation, was the second Klan, because the first Klan was gone. He basically annihilated them.
Almost eradicated them. No, that's absolutely right. And he was, he was really, maybe more so than Lincoln, I think. Of course, obviously Lincoln set the groundwork for it, but he was really, really, really for Reconstruction, and he was really for bridging putting the country back together, and he was favorable to many of Douglas kinds of activism. I mean, he really tried to put, especially in the first term, his actions were, his words were, stuff he did for Native Americans was huge. Right. I mean, he was momentous for us right after, in that fragile period after, obviously, Lincoln, and then 13th, 14th Amendment, and then obviously Johnson being impeached. He was super important.
Literally not mentioned.
And that is interesting that he's not even mentioned. I mean, it's not like he was one of these presidents that was, president for 2 years or, a month or something. Like, he was president for 8 years. I mean, he
But
was reelected.
Rutherford B. Hayes was mentioned, though, of course, because he's the one, obviously, which is factual. He's the one that let them back in because they were like, okay, you can't hold public office anymore if you're a part of the Confederacy. All these things were laying the groundwork. And when he was like, well, we need to do a compromise, and he removed the troops. Because remember, Grant and him at the beginning, they put troops there to say, we're going to make sure that what we're saying is enforced, because so the unions, the forces are going to stay there. So Hayes had these negotiations. Well, what if I pull the troops out? What if I do this or that and other? What if we pardon a bunch of people? Okay, that's all true, and that's in the essay. But how do you leave Grant out?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that makes it a little kind of suspect is that, well, if you're going to leave out one of the best presidents, and it's hard to not see that this is trying to fit a particular narrative, right? I mean, okay, everyone's got a bias, that's fine, but
right.
And
but
then
the fact is, it's went in schools initially as history until she started to get attacked, and she would come out and say, "Well, I never said it was history. It's a work of memory." Well, that's fine, because a lot of it's well written. That's fine. But then why are we teaching your memory? Oh, you don't even tell us whose memory it is. Why are we teaching it as history or as a true framework of America? It's your opinion.
Right.
And it definitely should be supplemented then, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing about a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's interesting. I haven't read some. I've read a few of the essays, not all of them. It's interesting about Hayes. I mean, obviously Hayes gets criticism, and I think rightly so. But I mean, Hayes really shouldn't have been president. I mean, that 76 election was pretty much stolen, but that's a whole nother debate. Tilden probably
one of the many.
Right.
Andrew Jackson's still mad.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a whole other issue.
You thought I was going to say Trump.
No, there's plenty of them. Jefferson stole the one in 1800. I mean, there's plenty of that have been suspect.
It ain't new.
Yes, but I think that's.
We didn't even talk about the Freedmen's Bureau.
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that they were trying to do all right. And where the land from the HBCUs come from, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Why not talk about that too? So,
right.
Can I give you something real quick?
Yeah, please.
As I mentioned that, and you said go ahead, I went because I forgot. Wait, I'm sitting on my computer. I can actually open it. So I opened the PDF of the book. And so I'm talking about in this section. This is my rebuttal to her actual essay, and talking about the things she's saying it's in our DNA and the things of that nature, and says this is how she prefers to show America. And it's a quote. It says, in response to Black demands for these rights, white Americans strung them from trees, beat them, dumped their bodies in muddy rivers, assassinated them in their front yards, firebombed them on buses, mauled them with dogs, peeled back their skin with fire hose, and murdered their children with explosives set off in a church. 100% true. All those things happen. Yeah. I follow that quote by saying, in her memory, it wasn't some whites who did these things. It was white Americans and the regressive racist policies of Jim Crow. But she ignores any positives that were done by whites in an effort. Unfortunately, as strong as Blacks are, our great achievements in America would not have been possible or have been greatly delayed without supports of some whites she aims to erase. Congress established the Freedmen's Bureau to help former slaves and poor whites after the Civil War, as well as approving land grants for HBCUs. Wealthy whites like Rockefeller and Rosenwald, believing education was the key to success, funded many schools specifically for Blacks. Many also sacrificed their lives. And I go on and on to list the names that we don't know of these, white college kids in the 30s and 40s who went down to the South and were killed trying to advance freedom for Blacks. So this was just an ugly time, and we had several of them in this country. If you want to teach it, I'm totally fine, but you do not get to say all whites. So John Brown didn't say, this is moving too slow. Let's go to Harper's Ferry and steal all the artillery so we can give it to slaves and start a slave revolt and get hanged from it, so you can say that his kids are just like every other white man.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, there's in for all of these dark chapters of history, you also have other stories of many white folks that were allied and helping and, risking their own life and making sacrifices. And again, that's not to, prop up white people. That's just to say that
great whitey, but they didn't have to do it. Let's be fair. It would have been much safer.
Right. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that you can't, it's just so simple to say, all whites or white America. And I don't know, A, if that's accurate, or B, if that's helpful. It's like, sure, that was maybe the predominant environment that was there. Fair enough. Okay, fine. But there's many other folks that were helping and coordinating. Native Americans did that. Obviously, different periods in history, Latin folk work together with other types of groups in this country. You see this all the time, which goes to the bigger point of how do we have those stories discussed in tandem with all the kind of, if you will, central stories about big events that happen, and instead of just this very cynical, pessimistic, negative, and incomplete story about the United States.
Ooh, that's hard because, well, not in the essay, but she had tweeted about these Asian American students who were suing Harvard, like basically like the nerve of them people after all we've done. And in her essay, she basically says that every group that's not Black owes their freedom to the Black struggle, right? Some parts of it, yes. Yeah. But some of their struggles were alongside and or before, like she mentioned the Native Americans, as if they didn't start fighting to be included in the country until Dr. King got up and said he had a dream.
Right.
I mean, like as if nobody else was struggling. I mean, like there aren't Asians from the South and from California in the 1800s. I mean, we didn't, I think about it, I think I'm right, but I think the only piece of legislation that specifically mentions a group, as bad as they were to Blacks, there was never a law that said Negroes can't do X, right? Mm-hmm. It was implied in the law, but that wasn't the name of the law. The only one I could think of was the Asiatic Barred Zone Act and the Chinese Exclusion Act. Mm-hmm. One was 1882 and the other was 1917. But here she is saying that how dare these kids to Harvard today when the only reason they're free is because of our struggle in the 1960s.
Yeah, I mean,
I heard get the bullhorn.
Yeah, I just can't. And look, to be fair, right? I know we're talking about one side of this for a little bit, but for me, I just can't. I can't really entertain too long people on either side of things or whatever group they're in that just make these big, broad, sweeping generalizations. They people that work in absolutes all the time. It really, it's frustrating because, like, look, I'm fine with people having strong opinions, or I'm fine with activists, right, that feel strongly about a cause. Like I have no problem with that. I guess my issue is that, look, you can have your passions, you can have your strong opinions. I certainly do. But we also have to we have to be more charitable to say, hey, listen, life is super complicated, super messy. Most things are multivariate. How do we understand things with nuance? How do we understand things with all of these different perspectives? And to just go around saying, talking in absolutes all the time, I don't think it's accurate, and I don't think it's helpful. And it just turns the volume and the temperature all the way up. And then people don't want to listen to you. And then it's like, well, then what's the real point here, right? Why are we doing this? And so I think
I got a question to what you said, though. I agree with it. But you said something about we're kind of beating up on one side. There's two sides on a lot of things. But how is there two sides to the 1619 project? I'm just telling you what she says.
well
these are her quotes from the.
Yeah, well,
it's simple. It's not even opinion. I'm not saying this is my opinion on X. I'm saying that she said that Asians in America. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I'll say maybe like on the other side, an alternative might be, listen, there's no such thing as systemic racism. We don't have to talk about
but we're not discussing that. So that's what I'm saying.
No.
This is not one-sided. It's the right.
Yes, no. I know what you're saying. I'm just saying it might be something on a different issue.
Okay,
Maybe not on this specific
I know
issue.
you saying there's another side to her fallacy.
No. Yeah, not on this maybe particular issue. I mean, there's certain things that are factually true and not true. But in terms of like, she's talking about her memory or her experience or how she's seen it or whatever. Okay, other people on the other side will, deny systemic racism. They'll deny. They'll say, why do we have to talk about slavery all the time? Let's not talk about it. Or, oh, well, people don't really experience racism that much anymore. And I think that those sorts of claims on the other side are, again, those are absolutes, right? A lot of times these things come down to a matter of, volume and frequency, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And a lot of times there's a lot of minimization, right? And I think it's like, okay, I don't think we should prop it up and, it's behind every bush and corner, but I also don't think it should be like, oh, well, this is just like a pretty rare occurrence now. I don't think it's that either. And I think it is, again, it's messy, it's complicated, and we have to be obviously respectful. But yeah, on this particular issue, yes, I there are just some things that are sort of factual from what we know, like, and yeah, and there's a lot of omissions there. There's a lot of problems with it, but as you said, right, and which I've read a little bit too, it's not all wrong. It's not all incorrect, and
it's mostly right. To be fair, it's 70% true, but infer is right. So they might be like, Charles punched Xavier. It's not a lie. We saw it. Say, therefore, Charles hates men. Say, well, whoa, how'd you get there?
Yeah.
How did no, everything you said, you were 3 paragraphs, well written, images. I can close my eyes and see and smell what you're talking about. Right. Then at the end, you say, therefore, McDonald's.
Right.
So right, you say so the therefore becomes the problem. And that's why it's so dangerous, because they paint a vivid picture. It's 100% fact. It puts you there. So now you're angry. And then now they send you off into some, strange, kind of abyss.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, no.
It makes it more dangerous. If it was so campy, if it was poorly written and misspelled and just, every black person has been punched by a white guy, such obviously incorrect stuff, then people would dismiss it out of hand.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then, I don't know if this leads to the other thing you wanted to talk about it, but I kind of go to the whole, the alternative may be X. One, I don't know who all you center right and center left people are talking to, because I don't hear people talking that way. Why do we have to talk about slavery and nobody experiences racism and I don't hear that stuff. So I don't know who these evil people are you are listening to, but even if they are out there, I don't think that they're getting their curriculum pushed into the schools. Like I said, this 1619 project went to one and then won a Pulitzer Prize.
Well, look, I mean, I have serious issues. I mean, this is the thing that really gets under my skin is, whoa, we have these people that you could love and agree and like and make you feel great with everything they're saying. Why are we like, literally, I didn't know who Ibram Kendi was 2 years ago, right? Or 3 years ago. And look, maybe people in history, in academia, they knew who he was and he was a big deal. Great. But a lot of people didn't know who this guy was. He writes 1 or 2 books and all of a sudden, we got to teach all his stuff in school to kids. It's like across the country. It's like, whoa, like,
when you say kids, there's now a kid's book, like a baby book.
No, yeah, I know. And look, I mean, I'm not going to demonize the guy, right? But it's just one of those things where it's like, I could give an example on the other side too, where it's like, look, there's people that they will prop up and I'm like, I don't know who this person is. And that's fine. Now everyone's going to know who everybody is. But it's like, if we're talking about scaling all the way to like schools and all these other things, maybe we should vet this a little bit, right? Like maybe we should let's give this a couple years. Let's workshop it. It's just like, no, it's hot. It's right here in the moment. Boom. We're going to just be like going to all, there's obviously plenty of studies now that show that a lot of these, diversity trainings and all these things aren't really effective. And it's like, well, how effective are trainings anyways? That's another conversation. But there's this point where it's like, why are we it's a reactionary thing. We got to do something. Who's talking about it? Boom. And then here we go. And it's just like, again, maybe you could use it. Maybe I'm not saying you shouldn't or you couldn't.
Right. You should probably know.
But yeah, this person's been in the spotlight for 6 months and we're already like, there's workbooks, there's this, there's that. Okay, fine. That's capitalism, whatever. You're going to make money off of things. But like, I think we need to be really, really, really mindful and take a breath before we're, that's what you would do, or that's what you should do. And that's what has been done with anything. For example, right? I mean, like, if I remember every time, in my field, right, in psychology, somebody will say, oh, there's a new intervention or there's a new study out showing the efficacy of this, this, and this. The first question, one of the first questions you ask is, well, does it replicate? A lot of times not, but okay, does it replicate? What's the sample size? How many people has it been tried on? What's it look like here? And most of the time people will say, this looks good. Let's keep doing some more research. Let's keep seeing how it works. Let's see how it works with these populations. Can we scale it here? Can we do it here? And usually it's like 10 or 15 years before we're like, okay, this is good enough. We have a lot of things to hang our hat on. We can start slowly kind of saying, this is, factual, or this is something that we can implement, et cetera. And I just don't see any of that kind of mold for a lot of this stuff that's going all the way. Many corporations and many schools are just all of a sudden teaching us. It's like, whoa, like, why we weren't doing this, 10 months ago? Like, what is this? How did this and I think that is problematic on either side, whatever it is, whatever the idea is, we shouldn't do things that quickly. Like, I just don't.
Xavier, we can't wait 15 years when blacks are being gunned down and slaughtered in the streets.
Yes. Well, that goes back to our other point, right? You have to give alternatives. You got to show people a menu of options of if that's the only game in town and they're yelling pretty loudly and they're talking on all the mainstream outlets and all that stuff, and all people want to do is just yell about it, but not provide alternatives, what are you going to do? That's all that's there. And so I think it really behooves people actually to say, well, wait a minute, let's critique this, but then here's another option, or here's another alternative, and maybe we can judge it against this other one. And then you see who has, better ideas and which ones stick and which ones are more effective and more accurate, et cetera. And I think but people like yourself are doing the hard work, but a lot of people don't want to do the hard work. And that's also frustrating. It's like, yeah, anybody can bitch and moan about how you don't like something. Fine. How do we work towards having accurate and better alternatives? I think that's the answer to that stuff. But
yeah, no, you're right.
So yeah, the next piece you were kind of leading into it, so we can get there. Is you wrote a Newsweek piece, last week I think it was put up, and
I think it was last week.
And so you talk about this about people in the center and kind of heterodox thinking and how this works with people on the left and the right. So just give us the main thrust of your thesis there, and what you were trying to say, and I'll see if I can help you out understanding some of your questions as a center left center person.
But I think it's so important to hear the sane voices in the room. And listening to this. Now, this is the one time, I gotta, do my disclaimer that we may get political, and I may say left or right, Democrats and Republicans, or liberal and conservative, which I try not to do because my fight is cultural. But sometimes it's necessary. And I think that we've gotten so crazy and so down the rabbit hole that the sane and rational voices are between. And I think that the way we get back to some normal center is with center people, primarily center left. And so I try to bring them on the show. I pump them up. I tweet out their stuff. So I'm a big fan. So it's not really attack, but it was just like almost a pleading thing because I hear it all the time. And often I'm on social media, and you would be surprised because I don't get into the fray too often. how many times I type a tweet and
Yeah.
delete it.
Yeah.
You'd be
Yeah.
surprised how many times I type a tweet and delete it. It's like, is this tweet is it gonna be read the way I want it to? Is it no, just delete it. But I got to the boiling point because we all do it, and to be fair, we all do it. I just try to train myself not to do it as much. But you did it once in the call in the interview. You do it. A couple other people, but not to the extreme of the people I wrote about in the article. And my point was the both sides. I don't like the both sides, and I think that approach is detrimental to our fight. But I say it for two reasons. I say it, I didn't get much into the second reason, but I say it because I think that we are a little more complex, and I think you would agree with that as people. And since the people are already yelling at each other anyway, I get why people do it. But since they're already yelling at each other, when you say both sides or you say that side X, somebody who may agree with that side more than the other side but don't fit that mold would be like, well, hey, he's talking to me, right? And so I think you need to say both sides. If you're talking political, there's no other way to do it. So I want to be clear that I'm not talking, you're having a policy argument, you're going to say the other side. If you're talking about the Democrats, then the other side is Republicans. It's clear. There's no dancing around the issue. But I use some examples in the article where I'm saying, like, you'll say, I'm a liberal and I am, Democrat and liberal on most issues, but I agree with some of my friends on the right who say, maybe we don't teach CRT to 6-year-olds, right? But the way this person will say it is in their article would be, I don't think CRT is a bit of a challenge. Now let me be clear that I'm not some crazy white right winger, and I don't agree. And I think Lindsay and Rufo are the devil, but they do have some inkling of, you know what I'm saying? So when you do that, it's like, it's like the backhanded compliment or the setup to do X, Y. It's like they're doing it to separate themselves because, I would never want to be agreeing with that person. So let me be as clear as I can to draw a line between me and them before I agree with them. And I don't think that's helpful.
Okay. So let me, I have a counter to that, but why do you think that's not helpful?
Because, okay, so I'll give you an example. So let's say they say these people on the right and these crazy Trumpers, you get all that stuff all the time. Well, I'm right leaning, but I'm not a Trumper. But you're talking about me because you're not giving me an alternative. There's no third box. Remember, the term is called both sides. So either in the argument, either I am an evil Trumper who hates, who loves the Klan and hates Black people, or I agree with you. There's no third option. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think it's not helpful. So in order to tell me that I'm right, me at large, not me directly, because they don't do it to people directly that often. In order to tell me, Charles, you're right about that issue, they don't feel confident enough to say, well, I don't agree with Charles on everything, but he's right on that issue. They have to say, nah, he is a crazy right winger, and I'm not, drinking his Kool-Aid, but he's right. They got to do that kind of dig kind of a thing first, is the way I say it. I don't think that you do that, but I do. I mean, we all do the both sides thing, and I do it too, but I try not to, like, darn it, both sides. That's not what I meant. Or I'll say liberals. I apologize. I don't mean liberals. I'll say that. But I think because I think there's a difference of somebody who's center left and somebody who's Antifa punching somebody for not wearing a mask while they're not wearing a mask.
Right.
Real quickly, I'll throw out the other piece. The other reason I think is a problem is because they're not two sides. There's 4 to 6 sides. So there aren't two sides, right? There's people who's right socially but not fiscally, or the other way around, but they love Trump or they hate Trump. There are people, it may seem odd, but there's some people who are not, which seems weird on itself, but they exist. I know some. It's like, hey, I was a Democrat. I just like Trump. So what box are they in? So if you're talking about the Trumpies, they fit. But if you're talking about conservatives, they don't fit because they're not really conservative on any policy except that I just think Trump's right.
Right.
So that's why I don't think it's beneficial.
Yeah.
Take me apart. I'm listening.
No. I hear you. I think for, obviously I've had a lot of these types of conversations, personally, on the podcast, online.
Right. I basically attack your whole, approach.
No.
Say he needs to shut down his podcast.
No, you're not saying that. No, I think that the what I've gathered, I mean, this is observational data, whatever, but is people people feel unsafe by certain ideas, and they feel unsafe by certain people that espouse those ideas. And so it does become a type of, I don't think it happens intentionally this way. I really don't. But it becomes a type of heuristic of sorts of, well, if I say something nice about Trump, I can't trust you anymore because of all the other fucked up things he says and does. And now you're giving him a couple kudos. Whoa.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh,
I can't,
right.
I can't get down with that. And now I'm really questioning where you're at with things. And I think it does become a trust thing. I think it does. I think it does because people, there's some, when people, certain groups or certain people in certain groups or whatever, when they make some pretty outlandish and wild and being hurtful and offensive, legitimately racist and misogynistic claims or statements, that
Like all white people were in the Klan. I'm sorry, go on.
right, that can be like, okay, I need to know where to kind of sort of put this person. And now I got this other person that's a friend saying, yeah, I don't like him either. Or yeah, I don't like these ideas. But this one thing is actually not terrible. It's like, oh, like I can't, that's one thing. I think it's a trust thing, right? And it's, poor heuristics like many things. The second thing is that people, they just need a villain. Everybody needs a villain. I mean, it's a simple way of putting this. We just love our villains, and we're gonna make one. And if we don't have one, we can't. We got nothing fighting for, or nothing to be against, or something. And you can't just all be okay. And so, you take your pick, right? People still have communism as the big bad villain, and look, fair enough, right? Like, I mean, communism is. In practice, we've seen that applied, and it's left literally millions of people dead. All right, maybe not a good idea. And so anybody that's flirting with, very hard left socialist or communist things, it's like, well, that thing is bad. And so now everyone that's trying to push that is also bad. And it becomes this whole thing. And look, if you read Marx, I mean, he's obviously one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. He's tremendous, obviously. A lot of his ideas are interesting. And I think if you take it from just like political theory or political philosophy, I don't think even he had any idea of, if you apply this with some pretty bad actors in play, that it would turn out this way. Maybe. But and I think if you just take it from a very scholarly academic point of view, you can have some nice things to say about Marx. Obviously, that's not where people are at with it, and on and on and on and on, right? It's one of those things where we need a villain, we need the bad guy, and if we don't have one, we'll make one. And I think that's also where this stuff comes from. And so where people have to make these caveats, I mean, I've done it, right? Look, here's this thing. Or somebody said this, I don't like this person, I didn't vote for them, or I don't follow their ideas, but this idea in particular, okay, let's judge it on its own thing. And I think sometimes that becomes, sometimes the person or their past transgressions, it gets in the way. It's just people not everyone can do that. And
well, that's true, but can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Everything you said, I agree with.
Uh-huh.
Not one word did I not agree with. Maybe
Okay.
my article was specific to who I was talking to, right? So
Uh-huh.
I'm only talking to those people who think that they see the problem, they're clear thinkers, and they are building themselves as kind of like you and some of the others. I'm talking to you, so I won't call out the others, but they're building themselves as, let's get away from these people with this silly noise and have a higher conversation. So the whole point of your conversation is that everybody can't be the bad guy, right? We got to be, we got to be more nuanced, and then they can't help themselves. why I agree with the first part where he said they don't even intend to do it. It's got a reactive.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But the second piece that's interesting is I agree with you, the villain piece and the Trump is if somebody if I think Trump is that bad, then I have to separate myself. I don't even that's not even quite what I'm talking about. It's the fact that it's the 6 degrees of Trump removed of it. So, if you were talking about so there's Trump. We hate Trump. Trump's the devil. So if you're tying yourself with Trump, it's a trust factor, as you said. Okay, I give you that. But then not Hannity. Right. So we're not even talking about Sean Hannity, Trump. It's Sean Hannity said something about Trump. But now we remove ourselves from here. So by the time we get to the point you're making, it's a point that somebody who's associated to somebody who's associated to somebody who's associated to Trump said. So it's not even a Trump thing. So that person might just be conservative, but may have never said anything. It's not like, yeah, but it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, she's tied to him. But it may not be somebody who's even tied to him. So you're just so ingrained to it, you're assuming it for one. And the other thing I don't like is when they bring it up when it's not the topic. I was speaking to somebody earlier about the education. Funny, I was like, I'm about to do an interview with somebody about education. Well, I was a retired teacher, so we're going back and forth about this stuff. And then I was like, well, what do you think the problem is education? So I'm talking about, well, I think, maybe the school should do this, maybe the teachers do this, maybe parents should do this. And then she's like, I said, what do you think the problem is? Now she's a retired teacher. She said, Republicans. Right. And then she said something. I said, well, I don't know if that's the soul thing. I mean, I grew up in an all black neighborhood. Everybody was a Democrat, everybody black. Republican, she said. And I said, well, you said we were having a conversation about the culture.
Yeah.
I talked about Yasha Monk in the article.
Yeah.
But there was another piece because Persuasion, I don't know if you read their stuff, is really, really good.
Yeah.
And right. So there was one talking about, how we needed to unite. And in it, they're saying, that, and this is what made me think of what you said something earlier when you said on the other side, people saying not slavery's not so bad, but blacks aren't experiencing racism today. And I'm like, I don't hear anybody saying that. But be fair to what I'm saying, because I think maybe part of it is my own fault because I'm too literal. I think words matter and people say what they mean. And these are educated, highly educated people sitting down and thinking about what they write. So I take them seriously. So in it says, when poor whites hear liberal politicians, pundits, and professors talk about white privilege and the ignorance of Trump voters, they feel the same revulsion Black Americans feel when confronted with the chidings of elite conservatives who say that Black people's problems would be solved if they would simply stop shooting each other and find a job. That didn't make it in the article, but I use that as an example because when I read that, my point was, okay, I hear lots of elite liberals saying the first thing, pushing the white privilege, whether it's Nicole Hannah-Jones, whether it's Kendi, whether it's in or whatever. I can name you prominent people, elected officials who say that stuff.
Yeah.
Name me an elite conservative who says all Black people's problems would go away if they stop shooting each other. And the response I get is, I hear it all the time, but nobody can name one. They're going to tell me Johnny in his mama's basement on Twitter. Like, no, did Sean Hannity say that? Did Tucker Carlson? Did Donald Trump? Who said that?
So I do think I agree with you. I hear you on that. I do think.
No, but have you heard anybody say it? I want to know.
No. I have no. I haven't heard anybody say that.
Right, and that's what the article said. So make a fair. These are smart people. Make a fair analogy. Is all I'm saying.
Well, yes, I would agree with. I would agree with you. I would say that if it's not on this piece, though, you can take something where there are other things that elite conservatives are saying that are, just as, tone deaf and inaccurate and horrible as well. Right? You see this.
Okay, give me one.
You do see this on both sides, right? I mean, you'll say. I mean, I don't watch a lot of, Fox News. I mean, I don't watch a lot of mainstream media anyways, but you'll hear people say that, they'll question or they'll say, they'll question the reality of systemic racism. Now, look.
I question the reality of systemic
racism. Yeah. So here's what I'll say. I think that is a loaded term. I think it's a really loaded term. I think a lot of the times, because of how loaded it is, people start getting really animated. I have my own ideas about it. I don't deny that it exists, but like most things, I think it's very complicated and nuanced by what we're meaning, by what we're saying with the term. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff kind of gets, people start getting friendly fire and stuff. And it's like, okay, you're denying that this exists. Like, you're a racist bigot. It's like, no, I'm not necessarily saying that, but there's a difference between institutions and people in the institutions over time.
Why can't we just say the people are racist? So if you have a racist who controls it,
sure,
then you're going to get racist outcomes because the racist gets to make the decision.
Right.
I agree with that.
Right.
But when you say the system, you mean that the law is it's going back to whether it's de facto or not, right? So it's like, was it specifically in the law, or was it just that it was implemented X way, or it had that kind of result? But everything has a disproportionate result, right? If you just say, well, I'm going to do this on the road, then it's going to benefit the people who use the road, and the people who don't use the road like, why do I got to pay extra tax? I mean, everything, right? So to say that, so that's the bad example. Come on.
Well, no, I mean, this is the first on the top of my head. I mean, I'm sure there are many other ones.
Because it doesn't happen as often. You all think it happens that often, but it does not happen as often. It doesn't. It does not happen. What Sean, and I don't like the far right, but what Sean Hannity will say is, I don't agree with many things AOC says, but she's right about that. That's what I want to say. I'm okay with that, about how I think he's wrong on many issues, but he's right on that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the flat out, they hate, I don't think that, high school is transgender. I don't think we should teach, 7-year-olds transgenderism, but of course, evangelicals are in a cult. You see what I'm saying? What I'm talking about is the specific thing. Is that when I say both sides, it's like, let me throw a little dig at them when I say it, right? So it's not just I don't agree with him on anything. That's totally fine. I'm okay with it. That's what I think is different. I don't think it's the same the way they do the both sides.
Yeah, no. And look, I think your main idea here, if I'm understanding right, is this idea of like that it's these 6 degrees of association, right? It's this, this person said this, and then this person mostly likes them, and then someone else that is writing about this person that likes this said person, and it becomes, well, yes, all the way down, it's ad hominem all the way, right? It's just like, yep. And
the only way I can say that Charles is right about something is the first day he's a hateful, evil bigot first. So I want to make that clear. I'm not saying that Charles is not a hateful, evil bigot. He is, but he was right when he said it was raining outside.
Right.
Why can't you just say I was right when I said it was raining?
Right. Well, and I think that's what's really difficult for a lot of people, because, I think a lot of our with people, right, just us as humans, is we're always doing these mental shortcuts. We're trying to figure out where people are, where they're not, and I think it has to deal with some of these psychological aspects of fear, trust, and mistrust. Are you reliable? Many of these things, and I think people aren't being vigilant enough to say, look, let me just take this on what it is, and then I think what's also hard is that people, are going to get kind of beat up on their own side, and
that's true.
And that's a problem. I mean, that's a big problem. And I'm repeatedly told, that, I'm not, really a liberal. How much left is in me? I'm just, probably a secret conservative, and I'm, I don't know why that's a bad thing necessarily, but I'm not. And I think I've been told I'm a libertarian. I've been told, all these things, and none of those things are true. And then every now and then I'll say something that's kind of like strikes the like liberal party line. And I'm like, yeah, I'll just say it on my own accord. I'll be like, yes, I believe this. I think this is, it's just a worldview. It's a philosophy thing. And in this one aspect of it, or this one idea, I very much agree with this. And it's like, oh, and they're all surprised. I'm like, why is that surprising? Like, I've never not believed that, but I'm not believing it because a group of people, align with it. I'm believing it because I think in my worldview, or how things are, that makes the most sense, right? And it becomes a lot of that stuff, right? It really is team.
Yeah, I joke with a lot of my liberals that I talk to, that I supported. I'm like, if we all I want to get back to the issues, but we ever get back to the issues, you're gonna hate me. because we don't talk about issues. All we talk about is we argue about race and all the other things that they agree with me on. They were like, yeah, I don't think that's helpful. We need to find another way. It's all, Charles is really logical. It makes sense. And then, we'll get back into the social, the government planning and the municipal level. They're like, I don't agree with you on anything, you crazy racist. But no, it's just that. And I joke, just like you say openly, you're really a liberal, and they try to say you're not. I'm a conservative really on every issue. I say the reason I don't sound like them is I think their approach is wrong, and I'm a human, and I know how to talk to people. But beyond that, the bigger simple thing is, I think you alluded to the issues of those, right? If you ask my opinion, then I sound like, I don't know, whoever right-wing person. I sound like them if you ask my opinion, but I'm not trying to implement legislation on my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Like I might be like, I don't think it's a government job to do that, but if I was king, I would do it, right?
Right.
Now, I think you said something about not going to the march on CRT. Like I'm not going to the march on every right-wing issue, but you might ask me a specific issue that you think I would be, moderate on. Right now, I totally agree with that. I was like, really? I was like, yeah, but I'm not going to vote for somebody because they're proposing. In fact, I vote against them because I don't think it's the government job to do it. But do I think people should do it? Yes. So then, right, if we just sat around talking about my views on every issue, they'd be like, my God, is that dude conservative?
Yeah. Right.
I just don't care that much.
Right. Which is so interesting, right? Because I think a lot of these things is like, one aspect of this is, I can have this is something that I've become this way over years, is when I seeing the country and seeing many different people in the country, I have learned to appreciate different perspectives and different worldviews and different opinions. And I can hold 2 or 3 or 4 ideas or opinions in my hands at the same time, and they don't have to all fall out, right? I can understand it. And understanding is not the same thing as agreeing, right? So when I go and I visit folks in Montana or Wyoming, I understand why they're more prone to being, conservative or libertarian for many reasons. And I think that is a very different view, or it's a different lens than, the conservative in and around a suburb of a major city or something, right? Like some of those things probably do make more sense, right? I don't know. I don't live in those areas, and even if I did or didn't, just because I can understand how someone wants to live or understand their viewpoint doesn't mean I agree with it or I accept all of it, or all these things. I just understand it and I get it. So then when I think about, okay, we're the 3rd largest country in the world in terms of population. One of the things of many different people is you're going to get different ideas. And so shouldn't everybody be able to do that, where they're able to know that people are going to have different ideas or opinions? And hey, I have mine as well in the mix, but I'm not going to go and kick down every door and be like, you must believe it the way I do. And if you don't, then you're X, Y, and Z. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So it's like, look, I can believe this for me personally, or for my family or people in my circle or community or something like that. But I also know that you're going to think about it differently, and that's cool too. I want to hear that. I don't want you just to believe what I believe necessarily. And I feel like that's the difference, is most people, it's like, believe what I believe, or we can't be friends, or I can't talk to you too much, or I need to put you somewhere over here, or I'm going to box you out because I can't trust if you're going to blah, 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 blah. And I don't think that that's true, because I think all of this is to say, at the end of the day, we're all human and we all care about many of the same things, right? We just have a different way of getting there. We have a different outlook. We have a different worldview, but we all are human and we have many, many, many things that we are similar in. And I think that if you build relationships with people, regardless of their opinions, ideas, political affiliations, etc., that's where you can find more similarities despite the differences. And I think that's the, my optimistic approach to doing things. But I don't know. How do you think about that?
No, I agree with that. And like, that's why I was saying, when you talk about you can have your opinions, but they have the right to have their opinions too. That's why I think it's really, because when people get shocked and bristle when I say how conservative I am, but it does, they think about how that could be. I said, but the really important part, more important than me saying I'm conservative, is how I don't necessarily think that the government should be involved in all those things. So that would be like me saying, you're talking about, the family and makeup or something, and I might be like, I might have an issue with single parents or whatever. Doesn't mean I want to create some legislation around it.
Yeah.
So what you got to understand is my opinion, and I keep it to myself, and I don't really write about it. But I'm not even ashamed of it. I don't think I'm a bad person. I don't wish ill on people. If you ask me, I'll tell you. But it's not like I'm saying that I think that women shouldn't be allowed to work. That's just say for the women shouldn't be allowed. I think it was the worst thing they ever did, letting women. And if it were up to me, So no women should ever be able to work, right? So you one of those people, yes. So if you were president or you were in legislation, would you sign and it came across your desk? Would you say, I'm like, no, because that's stupid, and it's not. It's just my opinion. I'm not saying it should be law. Right, just everything I want should be law. That's like me saying I don't like chocolate, which is real. This time it's true. I don't like chocolate. It would be like me saying I just want to mandate that they don't sell chocolate anymore because it's a waste and it's nasty. It's like, so my opinion is chocolate is bad, but I'm not trying to pass chocolate legislation.
Well,
it's no different than any of my other opinions.
I agree with you on the chocolate piece. I'm also not a big fan of chocolate.
Wow, I didn't know it happened.
Not, and people look at me like I got 10 heads.
Yes, exactly. But people probably look at you worse with that than anything else politically. Else.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
They're like, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah, what planet are you from? I don't know. I'm not really into it.
It's like, I feel so sorry for you because you're allergic. I never said I was allergic. I'm not
allergic. Right. But I think that's the point, right? Is that many people believe if you have a strong opinion, you have to do something about it, or you have to proselytize to other people about it, or that you need to somehow make it actionable all the time. And that is certainly true for some things,
yeah,
but not necessarily for everything. And I think also the presentation and how you go about doing it is probably more important when you're talking about, reach to other people. And I think that's the thing that we don't recognize. I mean, right. I mean, for me, right, one of the way I keep my liberal card, I guess, is, in my view, strong centralized federal government makes sense to me. It's never not made sense to me. It makes sense to me. And now that's a very broad statement in one sense. That doesn't mean I want government in everyone's lives. And I do think that there's some really, really awesome things about states' rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, I like strong centralized federal government. I'm very Hamiltonian in this way. I believe in that. I really, really like it. And okay, right? And so you and I would probably disagree on a whole lot of things, but then that's the point, right? It's like, well, again, I'll hear Charles' idea. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. Well, that's cool. Yeah, maybe some cities should do that. I would totally be fine with it. I mean, that wouldn't bother me. Like and maybe for me and maybe for you too, like there's some things where, it's a little bit more emotionally invested, right? So, abortion's a big thing. It's like, look, I get both sides. I totally get both sides. I really do. And okay, like, I mean, I have my own opinion on it, right? I'm pretty pro-choice, but I'm not, again, there's a difference between having your opinion and then do you want to make it legislation? Do you want to, and again, people will, activists or whatever, which I think we need a healthy element of that is, well, these are all of the horrible things of how it impacts someone's life. And if we don't do something about it to change it, more people are going to die, or more people are going to get sick, or more people are going to be whatever. And I hear that. I hear all of that. I don't think everything needs to be that. Not everything needs to be at 12. And I think for most people, they think it does. And the bigger problem I have is where when you start doing that kind of stuff, you erase the humanity of your fellow citizens and you just make your fellow citizens the villain and the enemy. And that's never good. I don't think that's ever a really good thing. And, I just think it's much, much, much harder. I'll say this. Is there any last things that you want to say? I mean, we kept it pretty tight for the most part. Good stuff on education. That was a lot of fun, and some of the political stuff. But any final words or final comments that you have that you want to share?
Well, I would just want to reiterate that we're not going to solve our problems politically. There has to be some political involvement because, the government, that strong central government you want is what's in some white man's heart. If you worry about racism through legislation, you're not going to solve, all the income issues and all employment issues through legislation. It's not going to happen. And let's be real. Here's another, not often mentioned thing that's the truth. Nobody's going anywhere. The blacks ain't leaving, the whites ain't leaving, Democrats aren't leaving, Republicans aren't leaving. So they're not going anywhere. So you can't just wait them out, or you can't put them out. So I would just leave it with the fact that if you want improvement, you're gonna have to let the other guy talk, right? You can't have such hubris that you think you have all the answers and that guy's wrong all the time.
Right.
You can definitely learn something from him. That guy in Montana you were mentioning, regardless of his politics, he also lives a different way of life than the guy in the big city. So New Yorkers are going to just know how to do some things the guy in Montana doesn't know how to do, and vice versa. So you can't just assume that I have all the answers because the country's big and it's diverse, and you wanted the diversity, but with that diversity comes with diverse voices and diverse ideas and things of that nature. So you can't lock them out. And I don't think we would disagree as much as you think. I don't have a problem with the strong system of government. I just like, because I don't align to any party. I just think that, I'm a rule follower by nature. So I'm like, give me the rules. Don't hold it back. Tell me up front, and don't change them on me, and see what happens. So through that vein, I just say, follow the Constitution. If you don't like it, change it. Change it legally. Don't try to, lock the people out because everybody gets a vote. But if you get enough people to add an amendment or to take away some executive power or to give some more executive power, then I'm just going to shrug and be like, okay. And then when all my people who agree with me, it's like, but I thought you didn't agree with that. I don't, but they did it the right way. The people voted for us, so give the people what they want. I'm okay with that. But, I just think what we have now is shout the guy down and beat him over the head and then take what we want. It's political robbery, right?
Right.
Well, on the street.
I'll say this just on that is, I think maybe on some of your policy or ideas on things, you're probably conservative but I think that your tenor and demeanor and presentation is definitely very centrist, which is, I think, really important too. I think we need to have people that can hold people's different ideas and opinions and beliefs. I think that's super valuable. So, well, I'll say, Charles, this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I think everybody else will enjoy the conversation as well. And where can people find you and get your stuff? Where's all the relevant places?
And find the podcast, the radio program, most of the articles, if I have time to post them all up there. But, it's probably the easiest way to find me. You should probably check out the Newsweek piece so you can tell where I was wrong, like Xavier did. And I hope I had fun too. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully your listeners will enjoy your break from the brainiacs and the PhDs to having common folk on.
Well, I like talking to journalists and writers and different people. I try to branch out. For myself, but then also for listeners too. I try to have a nice mix. I don't want just academics and scientists. I love those folks as well, obviously, but I like to mix it up and throw different people in there, every now and then. I think that's important. So,
yeah, well, it was fun. I know I appreciate it. Hopefully the listeners will too. And hopefully they will pick up the book, Race Crazy. It's not as bad as it sounds, They wanted it to grab you, but it's really just basically the BLM and the 1619 Project in their own words. So it's not, these people hate America. It's like, no, these people said this. Well, you tell me if they hate America. You may think they hate America. You may not. You may say I'm crazy and agree with them, but I do give my opinion. But it is, a lot of their own words and a lot of what they say. So I think you'll find it interesting.
Yeah, no, that's great. I will definitely put all of that in the notes. And thank you so much for coming on, Charles. This was fun.